Hey there, let's get started with the front-end portion of the project. The first step to any front-end project is to get a page actually showing on the browser. Now, it's a curious first step since technically it requires changes to the backend to serve up documents for the front end. In this blockchain project, we already have an Express server capable of receiving HTTP requests. So luckily, this Express server is also capable of sending documents to the browser. But before the Express server can send any documents, well, it needs a document to send. So let's start with a main index.html file for the application. We're going to create this index.html file in a new client directory for the crypto chain project. So make the client directory, and in here, create an index.html file. Now, if you're not familiar with HTML, the quickest way to explore HTML is to actually open up your browser and then do a special click and hit inspect. You're going to find this huge elements section, and all of this is HTML. You'll notice that there's HTML tags, and the top tag is the special doc type HTML. So in our project, in our index.html file, we're going to start with this overall meta tag that is doc type HTML, which helps the browser identify that this is an HTML document. And then we start creating tags, so pairs of tags for the actual HTML structure. So first up, there's the core HTML tags. Then we have a head section as well as a body section. The head section is for placing meta information about the page. For example, later on, we're going to include links to styling CSS files within this head document. For now, we're going to leave it empty though. We added it now for the sake of making the distinction between the head and the body section. But in the body, we can now structure the overall application. And for now, let's provide a div section, so a division that says, welcome to the crypto chain. Even add a ... or an exclamation point. The ... does seem a little more mysterious though. Okay, so that completes a basic HTML file for now. The next step is to actually serve up this document from our backend to the browser. Again, conveniently, we have this Node.js Express server in the application within the main index.html file. So you notice that there is an application set to the result of an Express function. This Express application is already playing the role of an API, which is configured to accept HTTP requests and serve up JSON as the response. Now we're going to configure it to also accept an HTTP request for the index.html document we just created. So below, after all the existing app.post and app.get methods, let's add a new one for an app.get method here that can serve up the document. The endpoint that we're going to use is the star endpoint. So the first parameter to app.get is an endpoint to define, and then this one is the star endpoint. This means that a backend will serve the front-end application when it receives a request at any endpoint, so that's what the star represents, any endpoint that hasn't already been previously defined. So we won't be able to get the document from these other existing /API endpoints. Cool. So this will work for the root /endpoint, meaning if we don't provide an endpoint at all within the browser, the root / is going to be used. But if you provide a /foo, for example, that'll be just fine to get the HTML document. The second parameter is a callback with a rec and res parameter itself for the request. And then we respond to the request using this res object. So we can use the res.sendFile function in order to send a file from the project to whoever is conducting the request. And in this case, let's point to the local client directory and find the index.html file. All right, go ahead and give this a save and let's see if it works. So in the command line, the command to fire up the project is npm run dev. Cool. And the result is that we should see listening at localhost 3000. Now, if you've never run this before, you're going to want to run npm install. So fire npm I and then end npm run dev. And this will install the necessary dependencies to get your project going. But once you have the result of listening at localhost 3000, go ahead and open up your browser and let's see if this actually worked. So I'm going to go to localhost 3000. And dang, the result is an error saying that the path to client-index.html must be absolute. Now, it's important to see this error because it's a mistake often encountered when first starting up the overall application. But it's an issue that we can address right away. First up, we're going to import a new module called path, which is a native Node.js module. So after all our modules, we're going to import a new one, or rather require a new one called path. Then down below where we're sending the file, instead of the local file reference, what we can do is we can call path.join to build an absolute path string starting with the current directory. So instead of send file of this local file, again, we're going to call path.join, which takes 2 arguments to create an overall string path. And the first one is a current directory, which we get with the __dir name keyword of Node.js. And the second one is our existing local client index.html string. So let's provide that as the second argument. All right, cool. With a save of that, since our dev command is configured to pick up any changes that have happened, and looks like I'm missing a parentheses over here, but essentially, since the dev command picks up any local changes, it'll restart the application. And now we're allowed to go to the browser, and let's see if on a refresh this works. And cool, we get the message of welcome to CryptoChain. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, but yeah, there it is. Nice. So since we use the star path for the application, note that we're using the /endpoint currently to get this index.html document. But we can use /foo, for example, /bar, just as long as it's not an existing API request that we have configured in the Express application. All right, it's nice to see that this works. A very interesting thing to see is if you go to the browser console, and I used Option Command J to automatically open that up, but you can also do a special click and inspect. Go to the network tab and then give it a refresh. And you're going to see that there's this request for whatever endpoint that you specified. And the response of that request is the actual HTML document that we have configured. So that is very nice to see. Oh, I'm going to make sure that this whole thing is visible. But again, if we do it at the root endpoint, we're going to see the same thing. It makes a request at the localhost /endpoint, and the response is the overall HTML document. All right, very nice. Now that we have this index.html file being sent from our backend to the browser, let's mix JavaScript and React into this. From here on out, we're going to build the rest of the blockchain application by creating new React components or updating existing ones. With React, we can make this static index.html file dynamic, so that way our application responds to user activity such as clicking or typing. Plus, our React app will be able to fetch data from the backend, or post data to it for that matter, in order to interact with the running blockchain